What's up, guys? It's Werner von Monrad back again today to talk to you about a group that I almost always talk about. New Jersey's own legendary The Outsiders. But in this case, this is kind of like sort of the last record, at least if we're talking about sort of vintage stuff as opposed to like kind of new solo later releases that's actually on vinyl. That I haven't already covered or talked about, so here we go. And this is specifically about one member, Yah Yah, who of course is famous for being Young Z's younger brother, and also for being the one who left New Jersey for a while and moved to Florida. And of course, you may, if you've been reading my blog and stuff, knows I've kind of covered multiple releases put out like this one. That he did with a group or a record label called Fifth Element, working with a producer named like Sage Lee. He put out a couple CDs. But in between leaving New Jersey and the Fifth Element stuff, that would have been like 2005-ish, is Orlando's Finest Volume 1, 2003. And no, there's no, as far as I know, a Volume 2 or any subsequent volumes or other, associated records with this. It's a compilation album presented by a guy named Adonis, who I don't know apart from his work on this LP. So as a compilation album, it is full of other Orlando artists, none of whom I know or recognize apart from their work on this LP. It's kind of a one-off. But Yah Yah of the Outsiders, and we know it's him because Yah Yah sounds pretty distinct and it's clearly him, both in his voice, his vocal style, his punchlines. There's no doubt. But even if you had any doubt, it does specify Yah Yah of the Outsiders on here, which is interesting because 2003, that would have been, long after the Outsiders were a thing with like Rough House Columbia and all that. But they still bill him as Yah Yah of the Outsiders. He has a solo song on here. But like I say, it's a compilation, so a whole bunch of songs by a whole bunch of different people. I'm not even really going to play a clips of the rest. It's not that great. It's not that amazing. It's not terrible, mind you, but it's not an album I would go listen to or recommend if it weren't for Yah Yah's track. It doesn't help that they front-loaded this LP with kind of the two worst songs. Like there's a cheesy love song on here where they kind of singing the hook, which I think is taken from like an easy listening song. I don't totally recognize it, but I feel like I heard it in my dentist's office, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cheesy. This is not sample-based production. This is all sort of, in studio. Sounds like they kind of made it from early 2000s, those sample kit kind of stuff or something. So not amazing. Lyrics aren't necessarily amazing, but some of these guys are okay. There's a guy on here called, where is he? Oh, he's on the other side. Top Shotta. He was pretty good. Some of the later songs of this album, you say, okay, this is pretty fine. This is pretty decent. Like, if these guys had gotten on more, they probably would have made some better stuff. If they worked with someone like a Large Professor or DJ Premier or anything like that, like they could have had a hit record. But there's no hit record on here. The only song of note is the Yah Yah one, so we're going to zoom right in on that. Although I should, say that Adonis, who presents it, also has a song on here, and he's featured on another song on here, so he is one of the artists, but he's not on the Yah Yah song. There are no production credits or anything. It just lists the artists, the guests in some case, when they have guest verses, and the 2003 copyright. But in the Yah Yah song specifically, we know, or at least pretty confidently say, is produced by a group called the Beat Surgeons because he shouts them out right at the beginning of the track. So pretty safe to say those are the producers, the Beat Surgeons. Not a group I'm particularly familiar with anyway. I don't know if they did the rest of the EP. Maybe they did everything. Maybe they just did Yah Yah's song. I will say, though, that Yah Yah's instrumental even, obviously the reason for the song, and you'll hear it yourself when I play some clips, is for Yah Yah's vocal performances, crazy lyrics and all that. But he does also, I would say, have the best instrumental track on this album. It's still the same style. It's not like recognizable samples or anything like that. But it just works. It's pretty deep. It's kind of funky. Like it's not really funky, but like kind of, smooth, kind of hard. Like it's just what you need to be a solid backtrack for someone who's going nuts on the mic. So it works well enough. It's pretty solid. But of course, it's really Yah Yah who's killing it. And he's coming with like crazy punchlines. A few of the punchlines, especially in the first verse, a little bit corny and definitely a little bit dated maybe. This is 2003. And, by making really pointed references, they don't age perfectly well. But like his wordplay and his, the way he puts syllables together is really sick. It's still his verse. When you hear the hook, it totally has that kind of Redman inspired Outsiders element that they had. So it's everything you want. Like if you say, oh, here's some Outsidah song I never heard of. Like, it's not like, oh, Axe doing a song with like Saturday where it's like this kind of dubstep pop song and it's just like a little bit of an Outsidah, voice on the track or something. This is what you want from an Outsidah song that you've never heard before, and from this period. So in that sense, it's very satisfying. This is a pretty rare record, hard to find, come by. But on the other hand, I have seen a couple cheap copies floating around. I think it's one of those things where like people don't know about it. They don't know who any of these people are. So it's obscure, like trying to find a copy. But if you do, it's not anything highly sought after either. I think only a diehard Outsiders collector like myself, and I'm sure a lot of people who read my blog and follow me are. So if you can find a copy, like, don't expect to pay through the nose, but also don't necessarily expect to find a copy terribly easily. This song's not online or anything like that, but I'm going to put some clips of it right now. You're going to hear it. Except, also, I want to talk about something else before we go. My last video, I did like a little bit at the end about Underground Vault magazine and stuff like that. I want to do a similar thing with this video. So I got a little something extra to talk about, and then we'll swing back around and play clips of It's Yah Yah. So I actually had 2 separate conversations with 2 totally different disconnected people about how tragic it is that there isn't any more hip-hop publications, like Source Magazine, Rap Pages, Hip Hop Connection. Like, they all pretty much died, or if they're going, they're like sort of shadows of their former selves, little blogs and stuff like that, but they're basically all dead. Certainly the great glossy magazines are all dead. And I got to say in both cases, these are both recent conversations, no, actually, just like sort of with underground hip-hop, they're still there. If you know where to look, like people say, oh, rap sucks now, it's all mumblecore or something like that. I mean, mumblecore is a little bit of a dated reference, but you get what I'm saying. People say, oh, it's all whatever. There's no more good hip hop. And like, yes, there is, if you go to the trouble of seeking out dope underground hip hop. If you just let whatever's playing on a Spotify playlist or on, like the Barbie movie soundtrack hit you, then you're going to get what you get. But it's out there. And the same thing, happily, thankfully, is there with hip-hop publications. So let's get into it. So first of all, Underground Vault, that's the magazine I was talking about last time. Well, they're back with a new issue. This is number 4. Again, it's really kind of stylish and full color and glossy. Like, they've moved well past those first 2 issues, which are more kind of very rudimentary. And, like, content-wise, it was always great. And in fact, that's what's important. Like, I almost show you these pictures and all just to show you for other people's sake, because for me, all I care about, give me dope interviews, give me reviews, give me interesting articles, and they had that in spades, and they still do. There's talks with like Fatboy Sharif, someone who I've covered on my blog before, Leronius the Versifier, Flu, who's the guy who produced that last Young Z EP. So, speaking of the Outsiders, so another dope issue. I've talked very briefly to the guy who puts these out, who sent me this issue and who sent me the previous ones, and there's more on the way. He's already got like issues 5 and 6 practically done, I think. So, seek him out. So there's that. I'm not going to say more because I already talked about Underground Vault last time, but, I want to be thorough since we're talking about hip-hop publications. Let's go deep and obscure. How about Soda Killers, a zine in a real kind of the classical sense of like a black and white sort of photocopied, I suppose, multiple pages. It's got, again, interviews, reviews, out of California. Luke Sick of Sacred Hoop has written for these, and I think is somewhat involved in the production of these. These are a little bit old. I don't know if it's called Soda Killers. I don't know if Soda Killers itself is coming out anymore, but he also writes lots of stuff. He's had little publications. He's had a novel. So he's a deep hardcore writer. He's always putting stuff out, but I single these out because these are pure like hip hop zines. Like some of the other stuff you'll talk about, like the Wild West or like crime stories, but this is pure hip hop, and so definitely worth seeking out. Here is something that's really fucking cool. This is a booklet purely on Curtis Blow's Christmas rapping. The whole book, I mean, booklet, zine, whatever you want to call it, but professionally published, full color, very stylish, by Bill Adler, from Def Jam Records, like Bill Adler himself, and who's kind of these days turned into more of a journalist and all. So he has like incredible knowledge, obviously, about Curtis Blow, Christmas rapping. He interviews and talks to many of the major players, people who played on the record, people who helped release it, put it out. So this is a really solid history. Like, even if you know everything, like I personally have blogged about Christmas rapping like 3 times on my website, like different articles about different aspects of it. Or one was actually for a magazine called King Mag. They had a hip hop issue, and I talked about a Christmas rap. So, like, I know a lot about this record. I'm pretty deeply involved. I'm a huge fan. And still, I learned a lot from this. There's lots of pictures of, like, vintage flyers. I think, like, Pete Nice of Third Base contributed a couple of those. It's put out by Noah, who from Coffee Breaks and Villains, the radio show. He's also got a couple of other similar kind of publications and stuff, but this one is the one that's like strictly hip hop. Some of the other ones are a little bit more other subjects. But it's basically written by Bill Adler. It's his research, his insights. He wrote all the text. And it's really great. It also comes with two little buttons, two little Christmas wrapping buttons. So that's a pretty cool thing. You can find that online. Just Google it. And of course, I'm biased on this one, but UGS Mag, this is issue number 4. If you follow my blog, you follow me on Twitter and all that, you know I've actually contributed articles to the last couple issues. I had one interview in issue 2. I had one issue with Helix C Armageddon. I had one with Custodian Records in issue 3. This is issue 4. It's not an interview, but I did do a pretty substantial piece on Nicki Minaj and kind of connecting one of her biggest hit records and controversies online to an almost forgotten hip-hop history and a legacy that she's part of, even if it's maybe somewhat unwittingly. So it's a pretty fun, long, extended piece. Hip-hop history, old to the new. Talks about some of the latest records and goes all the way back to the 90s and their connections to like Chino XL and definitely Eminem. That's like a nice 8-page spread with some really cool illustrations. The whole magazine, though, more dope interviews, lots of dope artwork. They have several artists working on this, so it's got some really cool styles. Also comes with some stickers and stuff like that. And there are, like, you know, if you're not, I'm obviously Mr. Physical Media, but if you're not, like, there are PDF versions you can get for cheaper and stuff like that. But, I mean, the whole thing we were talking about was sort of the sad, tragic loss of, you know, real hip-hop periodicals that you own that were printed out, that looked nice, that you could read. And I'm just saying, they're still here, you know what I mean? So, again, you got to dig deep. Dig Mag, which I also talked about in a recent video, they're still going. Like, again, they're not necessarily strictly hip-hop. You know, I contributed to a hip-hop issue. And that's the one I talked about last time. But they're still going. As far as I know, they definitely had plenty more issues since the one I worked on. So, again, there's just, the stuff is out there. Seek it out. Underground Vault, UGS Mag, Dig Mag, Curtis Blow's rapping, Soda Killers, again, maybe that's not out there, but definitely Luke Sick and those guys in the West Coast are putting out some kind of scrappy, underground, independent, written thing. I can guarantee it. So, all right, no more ado. You're probably just saying, shut up, Warner, I want to hear the Yah Yah records. Here we go. It's Yah Yah, 2003. Orlando's finest, New Jersey's finest, Yah Yah.
Yeah. Beat surgeon. Yeah, yeah. Let's do it then. Yo. I telegram Doja to Taliban soldiers and niggas get killed when the Palamon owes them. Stalamon, dollar signs, violent crime, Columbine, Bobby line coming, but getting there not in time. I got the turpentine, jerking nines, hurting dimes around me. Pussy stay wetter than the circle line. Everywhere I go, hoes wanna fuck me, cause I do chickens right like Kentucky. Plus my team stay packing like Green Bay. One shot to elevate niggas like Jean Grey. It's like lean prey running from the lion's jaws. Have to jump hard to watch y'all try and score. Peek the prime time, Ramdan, Einstein, 9 dimes twisted up. Get my mind blind. On the walls you used to see the marker. Nowadays I'm on the web like Peter Parker. Kids rolling with lead, we the authors. Spark dust, wetter than orcas and talk tough. Then I might take a partial walk just to hit you 30 yards like Marshall. I was taught life is short, so walk the talk. Cause the beast don't eat with a knife and fork. Still I heat, spent my life in court. Speak beef, then your wife is caught. The price is bought. Cause with these little niggas, life is naught. So a heist for your ice is a nice resort. You too short for this sport. I'm a ride. Legal. racist communists ain't trying to sit Adonis risk upon a ditch. Honor says your honor is attack like reconnaissance, eat like piranhas and vaginas wearing condiments. Y'all gon' make me grip these two heaters and flip your two-seater, flip your proof feet up and trip your little visa, strip your little meter. Your misbreathing moms will kiss you for the preacher. Give his last few words, then his action.